Welcome to the KAIROS Wisdom Keepers podcast, where ancient wisdom meets the modern healer. In our podcast, we share how ancestral soul wisdom and cyclical living support today's healers in activating greater wealth, health, intuition, and spiritual connection.
Welcome to our 15th episode of the KAIROS Wisdom Keepers, the descent into the underworld with Persephone and Demeter. I'm Janet Raftis.
And I'm Ina Lukas, and today we're going to talk about the archetypal energies of the goddesses Persephone and Demeter and how their journeys support us in embracing the wisdom of the Fall Equinox cycle.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the myth of Persephone and Demeter, we're going to start right there. So this is a mother-daughter combination here. Persephone was a maiden and Demeter was her mother. She's known as Ceres in Roman tradition. And Demeter is really after the goddess in the Greek tradition was fractured from the one great mother goddess into a variety of different archetypal energies, Demeter was the one who remained as the primary mother goddess, the goddess of grain and agriculture and the abundance of food supply. So she was a very important goddess. And her daughter Persephone was a maiden. And the way that the story goes, the one that we've mostly been taught, the more recent mythology, is that Persephone and Demeter are out in a field one day and they're walking and they're just having some mother-daughter time. And Persephone wanders around and she comes across some flowers and she stops to grab one of the flowers and smell it. And as she does that, the ground opens up and Hades comes up from the underworld and snatches her, abducts her, takes her into the underworld and forces her to become his bride. There are many variations of this story. So what I'm giving you is sort of, I'm giving you a distilled version that encompasses the variety of what you might hear. So in the underworld, Persephone is kind of trapped there, and up above, Demeter is wondering where the hell Persephone went, and she is wandering around. She is bawling, losing her mind. She is so distraught that her daughter has disappeared, as a mother would be. And she just travels around the world looking for her. She cannot find her. Finally, she comes across Hecate, who
Persephone.
She comes across Hecate. Persephone is still in the underworld. And Hecate, Hecate takes it upon herself to help Demeter. And in all of this, Hecate learns that Helios, the sun god, has witnessed everything and knows what's going on. And he tells her also that Zeus is aware of what is going on. Now, Zeus is Persephone's father, but Zeus was and is Hades' brother, but he's totally fine with this. He's like, whatevs, right? So finally, Demeter, though, is like, she finds out from Hecate that these guys know. And she goes to Zeus and she's like, dude, like, I am about to shut the world down, right? And Zeus is like, whatevs, again, like, doesn't really care. So she does. And the world everything starts to die as an expression of her grief, right? So everything all the agriculture, everything starts to die. Now, this hits Zeus where it really hurts. Not so much because the mortals don't have anything to eat, but because the mortals pray to him for the food. So Zeus is losing some adulation here, which is when he decides to step in. And he comes down and he strikes a bargain with Demeter that he will talk to Hades and see about her release. Now, Hades, when he learns of this, he tricks Persephone. So if you eat anything in the underworld, you have to stay down there. Persephone has not eaten this whole time. Hades tricks her, gives her some pomegranate seeds. She eats 6 of them. So at this point now, Zeus is like upset, and he needs Hades to get on board with him. So he tells Hades that he's going to have to let Persephone come up, and, this and that happen. And then eventually Hades is like, she ate 6 pomegranate seeds. We'll just do one for each month. She'll stay down here for 6 months, and then she'll go back up. So this is what happens. And in the spring, Persephone comes out of the underworld, and the world comes back to life when Demeter's grief is assuaged, so to speak. So the thing is, though, is that while she's down there in the underworld, Persephone really claims her position as queen. She really steps into her sovereignty. She becomes a queen of the underworld, really holding that dark goddess energy. So she's got this maiden energy of the spring, and she's got the dark goddess energy of the underworld, right? So what's the underworld? Well, the underworld back in the day was a part of the natural cycle. So people were born, they lived their lives, and they died. And when they died, they went into the underworld, and it was a time of regeneration. It was a time of preparing to be reborn, because they absolutely believed in ancient times that the soul came back in a different form. And so this was a really regenerative place. It was a healing place, and it was a big deal to be the queen of the underworld, because that was really like coveted position.
I mean, of course, queen of the underworld.
Right? But what's really interesting, and I'll keep this part short, is that in the original mythology, way before the rise of before the patriarchy became really entrenched. So after the patriarchy is kind of rising, before it gets entrenched, the story goes that Persephone and her mom are walking in the fields, and Persephone asked Demeter, "Mom, what happens when people die?" And Demeter's like, "Well, they go into the underworld." And she says, "Well, who's helping them?" And Demeter says, nobody's helping them. And Persephone is like, "Well, that's terrible. They should have some support down there. So I think I'm going to go down there and do that." Right? So in the original story, she opts to become a psychopomp, which is a person who which is an entity that helps people transition between worlds, or a person who does that. She says, so she takes it on herself to step into this position, right? And as the patriarchy rose, a lot of the mythology in the Greek area, anyway, and other areas of the Near East, there's a lot of raping and killing and slaying of the goddesses as the gods come into their power. So this is why we see in the later mythology that Hades rapes Persephone. He abducts her, he rapes her. She still comes into her power, which says more about Persephone than Hades. But in both, versions of these stories, she really does end up in a place of reigning in the underworld, really owning her power. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a lot. And the importance of this, the descent into the underworld, is that this is really about the wisdom of letting go, right? This is about the fall season, is this energy of the wisdom of letting go, right? And Persephone really embraces this cycle, this time of release. She's willing to go into the underworld and to take care of all these souls. And she knows what it is to release. Now, up on Earth, Demeter goes through this lesson over and over again. Every year now, she mourns the loss of her daughter. And as a story that holds these archetypal energies, as a mythology, as a part of the collective consciousness, it is stories like these that instruct us as humans, that show us as humans what is right and natural. And we have lost these stories. We've lost this energy of the underworld. We've lost this capacity to be really connected to the cycles. And this story taught people oh, there's loss. There's a time when the plants die. There's a time when the food sources wither. There is a time when we go into a state of rest and regeneration. And that is also a time of grief.
It's so powerful to to hear you share that story and to really bring it into context of her rising in the spring equinox and going back into the underworld at the fall equinox, and that journey of empowerment in the underworld. And I love how she made the choice, in the original story to be there as a guide for people when they are in that place of transitioning between worlds. And one thing that we love working with in KAIROS is bringing in archetypal goddess energies and animal archetypes to support us during these seasons. So as you're moving into fall, and how Demeter's grief aligns with this fall cycle, you can call on these goddesses Persephone and Demeter to support you in your own journey into the underworld. You can bring their energies forth if you are wanting that support as you go in. And this Mabon cycle really is, nature is showing us how to let go. The trees are showing us that we can produce and be green and be beautiful all summer long. And then there is this natural senescence that is okay. It is part of the cycle of life to let go of that which we have so beautifully produced, to let go without attachment, to go into that dormant place, into that inward place that allows us to fully regenerate, because that's the beauty of going into the underworld. And as we go from Mabon into Samhain and then into Yule, we right now are in the descent. We are halfway between the summer solstice and the winter solstice, which is the dawning of the light. And so we are in the descent of the days getting shorter day by day, of the temperatures dropping, of our bodies' biological systems going into slowing down, like a bear going into hibernation, where our metabolism is slower, where we're ready to go inward. And this process of ending is more about having the stillness and the downtime to really process all that you've just expanded, grown, harvested. Because if you just keep moving forward without integrating and digesting and reaping all the benefits of that which you have grown and harvested, then you're in this constant go, adrenal burnout, modern day energy. And so there's this beauty, like when you really get that every cycle, when it comes to an end, that means that there is a beginning in store. And when a cycle comes to an end, it's important to grieve what you're losing, because it means that you deeply loved, right? Anytime we're feeling grief, it means that sadness that we're feeling inside is the loss of something that we deeply, deeply loved. And so with the grief comes this immense gratitude and appreciation for this person, this life, this chapter of your life, this season, of summer, and the beauty and the fun and the outward expression and all the great celebrations of summertime, and bringing in, oh God, I gained so much. I expanded so much. And in that expansion, I'm just going to savor it. I'm going to savor it as I go into winter. I'm going to let it digest in my body, in my mind. And I'm going to now turn that into fertile soil that becomes the Yule cycle. And then once again, there's rebirth in the spring.
Yeah. And I love that you brought in that idea of digestion. And one of the things too about this cycle is like, it really is, it's that time of like deep integration because everything slows down, right? So there are less daylight hours, there is more darkness, there's more moon energy. And so we go into a natural, like we're more apt to be able to slide into trance states, into channeling states, into connection states, right? Because when you go into, quote unquote hibernation, certainly our hibernation is very different than a bear's hibernation, or even than it was, not that long ago during the winter months, in areas where there was winter. During those winter months, you didn't really go outside a whole lot, right? I mean, there really was more of that contained being in the den energy, and which is kind of like underworld energy, right? So there's a cave, like womb, like energy to that. And Persephone, and just, so much of what I love about her in this archetypal energy that we can access is she goes into the underworld and she claims her powers as a queen. Some of her powers as a queen are the powers of the psychopomp. They're the powers of the highly psychic, intuitive woman, right? And this is the time when the veils are thinner, especially as we get into Samhain and Yule. But as we descend, we're leaving behind the hustle and bustle that kind of closes us off from receiving a lot of intuitive hits, right? That's not to say like people are psychic year round. Psychic is psychic is psychic. And also though, the more spaciousness you have in your life, the slower things are, the more you allow for the settling down and the stillness, the more you're going to get from source. You're just going to be more open. There's going to be less crowding in your body and in your mind that really allows for that to come through. And the moon, we know, is associated with intuition. There is literally more moon time, right? More nighttime that is allowing us to, where the moon is visible, where the moon is more prominent, right? That connection, that energy of like being in lunacy, which is in, ecstatic communion with the moon. That's where that word actually came from. Lunatics here.
We are full-blown lunatics.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful experience. Like that is like, was saying, like each cycle has its wisdom. And the wisdom of these fall and winter cycles, a part of it is the wisdom of being way more in touch with yourself. If you allow it, if you take this opportunity, this invitation to slow down, to open up, and to really allow spirit to speak and flow through you.
Yeah. Ooh, there's so much juiciness here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so many of you may be feeling sadness. You may be feeling grief at this time of year. You may be feeling the sadness of the loss of summer, or that knowing that, oh gosh, now we're going into the depth of winter. And the key to really working with the cycles is the full embrace of them. So allowing yourself to feel grief. Like this is a time where it's okay to let the tears flow. It's always okay to let the tears flow. And this time of year, nature really supports you in that, in the grieving. And so, allow, and we're coming into an eclipse portal here too. Like there's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot in the energy that we're working through now. And so the more that you can surrender into it, and even Persephone in her journey, it's like she went into the underworld and there was this surrendering into her power as queen. And that's the beauty. You surrender into your power. You don't like charge into it and grab it. Right? It's not like external to you. Your power is inside of you. And when you're pushing against it, that's when life becomes very bumpy. But when you surrender into this beautiful knowing, and that's part of the integration process, I'm going to get quiet. I'm going to slow down, and I'm going to feel this power that has built in me after another trip around the sun, after another season of summer. Now I'm like at a whole new level of power. And what does this power feel like? What is it? How is it wanting to rise in me? How is it wanting to rest in me? How is it wanting to be brought forth in me?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking as you were saying that, we have these, archetypal energies are just so powerful, and we have so many of them that can really, as you start to drop in, you can really tune into. So here we are, we're in Libra season. Libra is an archetypal energy as well. And Libra starts with the fall equinox, the day of balance. Libra is the scales, Libra is the balance. But with that day of total balance, we dip into the descent, right? Then we get to, Scorpio's energy when we get into Samhain.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like full on underworld energy. Like you are in it,
right? In the best of ways.
In the best of ways. And there's a lot of variation to this, right? We get into Sagittarius when you're into like exploration, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're out traveling the world. It just means that you're allowing your mind to go places. Like Sagittarius likes to travel the multiverse, and so that's a great thing to do during the winter, or at any time, really. Sad speaking here. But when we get into the spring equinox, when Persephone rises, that's the energy of the maiden as well. And the maiden is like spontaneous and intuitive, and she's out there and she's doing her stuff, and she's conquering the world in this really authentic, intuitive way. It's also the season of Aries, right? Like Aries is what is initiated in that spring equinox. And there is just saying like, now is not the time to conquer the world. In the spring, okay. Right? You've got the maiden, you've got Aries, you've got like bows and arrows, you're good to go. Now it's like slow down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's important to remember that we're being impacted by multiple different cycles at once. So we are living in a seasonal cycle, depending on where you are on the planet and where you are, how close you are to the equator, and how deeply the days and temperatures shift. There's lunar cycles that are impacting us every month, and menstrual cycles, but there's also you on your own internal cycle. So depending on when you're born too, every year you go through all the planets in your own cycle. So just also honoring that for some people, your uptime of ideas and inspiration may be winter, and it's all okay. It's all okay. It's like noticing, but when you really start embodying the understanding of spring, summer, winter, fall, all the rebirth and the death, then you can notice where you are in your own personal cycle, so that you can embrace the descent into the underworld, so that you can surrender into it. And then you become more recharged year round, because you're nourishing yourself as you're going in.
Yeah. And that's such an important piece, right? Is that, as long as you recognize what your winter is, what your fallow time is, what your underworld time is, and we get it every month too. So even in the height of summer, we have the dark days of the moon right before the new moon. And that is the fallow time that corresponded historically to women's bleeding time. So that was the time that women really did have to slow down, which we don't do anymore, right? But at the time, women would retreat at that moment. And I'll say too, when working with the astrological chart, astrology, the astrology we use was invented in the Northern Hemisphere. So it is archetypal energies that are more relevant in the Northern Hemisphere as far as alignment with being out conquering the world. So people that are out conquering the world right now are in the Southern Hemisphere. So you go, Southern Hemisphere. Bring it.
Yeah.
It's so magical, I think, this whole conversation around cycles, and these archetypal energies. And, if it's not Persephone and Demeter for you, what are the energies that you love to work with? We adore archetypal energies because archetypal energies exist. They are in the collective unconscious. They have different names, right? Like you can find across cultures that, similar ideas, but with maybe different names to them, but they're universal. And not only are they universal, but they're timeless. So these archetypal energies that come from Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology or Native American mythology or Native South American mythology, like they all hold these fields of energy that have lessons for us, that have gifts for us, that have insights for us, that have shadow work for us, that have, healing work for us. And so some people will really resonate with the story of Persephone. Like I am definitely a Persephone girl, highly sensitive, mystical energy, also sexual trauma, and some of the things that Persephone went through, and it may be that you really, if you've got a lot of mothering energy and you're just like, oh, you just want to like curl up on the sofa with your kids all the time, like you may be holding more Demeter energy, right? Or it may be that it's a completely different archetypal energy. And so even as we share stories like this with you, if this particular version of archetypal energy doesn't respond, if it doesn't resonate with you, but explore what might, look up other underworld goddesses. There are many of them, right? From all over the world. I mean, it's amazing. You can find underworld goddesses in Mesoamerican history. You can find them in Norse tradition. You can find them everywhere. So find the energy that will support you as you move through cycles. Find the energy that you're like, I've got to really resonate with this one. And you can sit with it. You can create ritual with it. You can activate the field within you by spending time with that energy. We tend to, in our societies, run like very strong in certain archetypal energies. And sometimes it can become too much, right? It's nice to temper it with other energies, to explore other archetypal energies, and they're all available for you, and say, well, if I have too much Athena over here, right, maybe I can bring in some Demeter over here. And what does that look like for me? It can be really healing, and it provides you with the gifts of these archetypes in a way that really allow you to evolve consciously by co-creating with them.
Yeah. And that's reminding me that we do have a free Maven ritual PDF if you would like to work with these fall equinox energies and create ritual and ceremony. There's a very beautiful, powerful process in that ritual to work with the equinox energies and the energy of balance. And we also have a fall equinox activation that will link in the show notes, a recording of a very potent fall equinox activation that is harnessing the energy of the season to support you in bringing balance, especially in moving through this eclipse season. And it's a very empowering, deep and beautiful activation. So these are great ways to work with this energy, the fall equinox and the underworld.
Yes. So each week on this podcast, we share cyclical wisdom and practical tools and insights to support healers and intuitives to work with the seasons and archetypal energies as a process of awakening your gifts. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can also follow KAIROS Healers Academy on Instagram or any other social media channel. Like and subscribe.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of KAIROS Wisdom Keepers, where healers walk outside of time.